I never really thought much about Walmart. To me, it was just there, like part of the landscape. A place you ran into on a Tuesday night for paper towels and walked out with way more than you meant to buy. Cheap, convenient, familiar. But the more I looked into it, the more I peeled back the layers, I realized there's a much darker story hiding behind those low prices and wide aisles. This isn't just a story about a retail giant. It's about control. It's about people. And it's about what happens when one company gets so big, so powerful, that it quietly rewrites the rules of how we live, work, and even think. This is the true story of Walmart. And once you hear it, you'll never see that blue vest the same way again. Chapter 1. I grew up with Walmart, and that was the problem. I don't know about you, but when I think about Walmart, I think about how it's just always been there, like a constant backdrop to life in America. It's where we'd go after school for snacks, where my mom bought our first DVD player, where I spent way too many awkward teenage hours wandering the makeup aisle, convincing myself I needed another cheap lip gloss. It's hard to imagine a world without Walmart. For a lot of us, especially if you grew up working class, Walmart wasn't just a store. It was the place to get through the month, a savior in fluorescent lighting. But what if I told you that the very thing that seemed to save us was also slowly eroding everything around us? I remember watching this old movie once called Where the Heart Is. It starred Natalie Portman, and in it, she secretly lives inside a Walmart while pregnant, gives birth on the floor of the store. I was a kid when I saw it, and I remember thinking, that seemed kind of magical. Like this girl had nothing, and yet she found safety, shelter, everything she needed inside Walmart. And honestly, at the time, that didn't feel so far-fetched. Walmart really did have everything. Toothpaste, canned soup, school supplies, a bed and a bag for $30. It was the one place you could go when you had nowhere else to go. It made you feel like you could survive, even thrive. And that's the thing, Walmart was designed to make us feel that way. For years, I bought into the narrative. Low prices, always, convenience, community, a place where the customer is always right. But what I didn't know, and what I think a lot of us didn't know, is that behind those price tags and wide aisles, something darker was happening. Something that slowly reshaped how we shopped, how we worked, and how we saw ourselves. Because while we were saving a few dollars, entire communities were being gutted. Small businesses were disappearing. Workers were being underpaid, overworked, and silenced. And the family behind it, all the Waltons, were quietly becoming the richest family in the world. And they weren't just rich. They were untouchable. I'll admit I didn't question it for a long time. Walmart was just part of the landscape, like stop signs and McDonald's. But then I started reading, listening, talking to people who had worked there. And it all started unraveling. This episode isn't about canceling Walmart. I'm not here to tell you to burn your shopping bags and swear off toilet paper from the mega shelves. I'm here because I think we deserve to know the full story, the one that wasn't printed on the rollback signs. The story of how Walmart became a retail empire and what it cost us to keep those prices so low. So let's start from the beginning, because the story of Walmart doesn't begin with money. It begins with one man, Sam Walton, and a dream that on the surface looked like the ultimate American success story. But what happened next? That's where things start to twist. Chapter 2. The store that changed everything. You know what's wild? I can't remember the first time I went to Walmart. Not because it wasn't memorable, but because it just was always there. Like background noise, like the hum of a refrigerator or the buzz of fluorescent lights. Constant, familiar, normal. I mean, for so many people in this country, Walmart isn't just a place to shop. It's a lifestyle. It's the only option. It's where your paycheck goes the minute it hits your bank account. And for a long time, it felt like a good thing, a safe thing. The one place where you could show up in pajamas and still get everything you needed in one go: bread socks, motor oil, a frozen pizza, and maybe a new bra if you're lucky. But underneath all that convenience was something else. Something I didn't have the language to describe when I was younger, but I felt it. This unspoken pressure to always get a deal. To never pay full price for anything. To feel like if you spent more than you had to, you were doing something wrong. And that wasn't just by accident, that was by design. Walmart didn't just give us lower prices, it changed the psychology of how we shop. It made full price feel like a scam. It made cheap feel like smart. It conditioned us, trained us, really, to expect more for less, even if that more came at someone else's expense. I used to think that was just smart budgeting, being thrifty. But now, I'm not so sure. Because when you really stop and look around, you start to see the cracks. The small businesses that used to line Main Street gone. The local hardware store, the corner pharmacy, that family-run grocery store, they just couldn't compete. They vanished. And what took their place? A single massive box with smiling greeters and greasier shopping carts. And it's not just the businesses that suffered. It was the workers, the communities, the very fabric of what made towns feel like towns. But somehow Walmart kept getting framed as the hero, the savior of the working class, the place that created jobs and kept America affordable. And sure, technically, that's not wrong. But when you look closer, you start to wonder at what cost. Because while we were celebrating our $5 t-shirts and $1 loaves of bread, something much bigger was happening behind the scenes. Walmart wasn't just selling products, it was rewriting the rules of American capitalism. It was setting a precedent: low wages, anti-union policies, volume over value, speed over sustainability. And maybe that sounds dramatic. Maybe you're thinking it's just a store. Calm down. But here's the thing, Walmart isn't just a store, it's the largest employer in the United States. It has more than 2 million employees. It brings in over $1 billion in revenue every single day. That's not just big, that's empire level. And empires, they don't rise without consequence. So while most of us were loading up our carts, the people behind the curtain, the Walton family, were raking in billions in quiet. No headlines, no press conferences, just more money, more power, and more control over the way we all live. We didn't even see it happening. Or maybe we did, and we just didn't know what to do about it. Because when a company becomes that big, that essential, how do you even push back? That's what I kept asking myself as I started digging into this story. What does it mean when one store becomes so powerful it can reshape a nation's economy, its workforce, and its very culture? And to answer that, we have to go back to where it all began. Back to the man whose vision started it all, Sam Walton. He wasn't born rich, he didn't inherit a company, he built it. But like a lot of things that start with good intentions, it didn't stay that way. Let's talk about Sam. Chapter 3. The Rise of Sam Walton. So, let's talk about Sam. Because here's the thing, before Walmart became the retail giant we know today, it started with one man, one vision, and ironically, a whole lot of rejection. Sam Walton was born in 1918 in Kingfisher, Oklahoma. And right out of the gate, life wasn't easy for him. His family struggled financially like many during the Great Depression. They moved around a lot, chasing opportunity, just trying to stay afloat. And like a lot of kids who grow up with instability, Sam learned early that if he wanted anything, he had to earn it himself. He worked odd jobs, milked cows, delivered newspapers, sold magazines door to door. He was hustling long before it became a trend on Instagram, and honestly, I respect that. There's something admirable about someone who works their way up from nothing. Sam wasn't born into wealth. He built his fortune from the ground up, or at least that's the version of the story that's always told. But let's keep going. In college, Sam studied economics, worked multiple jobs to pay his tuition, and after graduation he took a job at J.C. Penney. That's where he got his first real taste of retail. And apparently he was pretty good at it, at least the customer service part. The paperwork? Not so much. According to his boss, Sam was a bit of a mess behind the scenes. Disorganized, bad with receipts, kind of the guy who had a big heart but a messy desk. And one day his boss pulled him aside and basically told him, "This isn't for you. You're not cut out for retail." Can you imagine being told you're not cut out for the thing that will one day make you a billionaire? But Sam didn't quit. He just took the long way around. World War II broke out, and Sam enlisted. He served from 1942 to 1945, and when he returned home, he was ready to try again. This time on his own terms. He got married, settled in Arkansas, and convinced his father-in-law to lend him $20,000 to buy a small Ben Franklin franchise. That's like over $350,000 today. A massive risk. But Sam had a plan. He wasn't interested in doing things the traditional way. He read the standard retail manuals, the handbooks on how to run a store, and then he tossed them aside, literally. He said they were all about maximizing profit and nothing else. And to him, that wasn't good enough. Instead, Sam decided to flip the formula. He slashed prices, cut out the fancy displays, focused on volume over margins. He believed that if you gave people a good deal, really gave them value, they'd keep coming back. And they'd bring their neighbors too. And it worked. His Ben Franklin store in Newport, Arkansas, didn't just survive, it thrived. It became one of the most profitable in the region. He paid back his father-in-law's loan in just a few years and was poised to keep growing. But then came the first real betrayal in Sam's story. When his lease was up, the landlord refused to renew it. Why? Because he wanted to give the store to his own son. Just like that, Sam was out. Kicked out of the very store he had built from the ground up. All that success gone with nothing to show for it. But Sam, he didn't fold. He took everything he had learned, every pricing strategy, every customer interaction, every lesson from that tiny store, and decided to build something bigger, something that couldn't be taken away from him. He opened more Ben Franklin stores over the next decade, a dozen to be exact, all profitable, all built on the same philosophy: cut costs where it doesn't matter, and pass the savings on to the customer. But by the 1960s, Sam had had enough of working under someone else's name. Ben Franklin wasn't his brand. It didn't reflect his vision. So he started dreaming. What if he could create his own chain of stores? What if he could scale his philosophy nationwide? And in 1962, that dream became real. In the small town of Rogers, Arkansas, Sam opened the very first Walmart discount city. The name simple. Wall from Walton and Mart from Market. Straightforward, no frills. Just like the store itself. And honestly, no one took it seriously at first. People said it was too ugly, too bare. No polish, no flair, just concrete floors and metal shelves. But Sam didn't care. Because the customers came. And they kept coming. Why? Because Walmart had what people needed. At prices no one else could touch. Sam had figured it out. While other retailers were focused on cities and upper-middle-class shoppers, he saw the power in serving everyone else, the small towns, the overlooked communities, the people who didn't have fancy shopping malls nearby. He didn't look down on them. He built for them. And for a while, it felt like something honest. Something almost noble. But that's the thing about dreams. Sometimes they grow into something you never expected. And sometimes they turn into something you can't control. Chapter 4. The Philosophy That Built an Empire. You know, when we talk about corporate giants, we usually imagine cold, calculating boardrooms, greedy executives, spreadsheets, and bottom lines. But the crazy part about Walmart is that it didn't start that way. At least it didn't look that way on the surface. Sam Walton had a really simple philosophy. It boiled down to this: keep costs low, treat the customer right, and make your employees feel like part of something bigger. That was it, nothing fancy. And to be fair, in the early days, it worked. He called his employees associates, not workers, not staff, associates. He believed that if people felt like they had skin in the game, like they were a real part of the business, they'd care more, try harder, stay longer. And at first, people did. There were stories of Sam walking through his stores, chatting with cashiers, asking stockers how they were doing. Not in a PR stunt kind of way, but genuinely. He wanted feedback. He listened. That whole open door policy thing, it actually meant something back then. And the customers. They loved it, because Walmart wasn't just cheaper, it was friendlier. You walked in and people greeted you, smiled at you, helped you. It didn't feel like a giant corporate machine. It felt local, approachable, familiar. Sam even had this little tradition. Every morning before the store opened, employees would gather and do a cheer, a literal Walmart cheer. It was corny, yeah, but it was also kind of sweet. It created a sense of unity, like, hey, we're all in this together. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying Walmart was perfect, even back then. But the intention behind it felt human. It was retail, sure, but it had a soul. And then came the real genius. Sam realized something that no one else in the retail space had really grasped, yet small-town America was underserved. The big-name stores were all focused on cities chasing wealthier shoppers. They saw rural areas as a waste of time. But Sam didn't. He was from a small town. He understood what it meant to drive 2 hours just to buy an iron or a pair of sneakers. And he saw the potential there, not just as a market, but as people who deserved access. Dignity. Options. So instead of building stores in New York or LA, he built in tiny towns across Arkansas, Missouri, Kansas. He brought big city variety to places that had never seen it before. And people were grateful. It's easy to forget now, but back then this wasn't just business. It felt like service, a lifeline, a promise that no matter where you lived, you didn't have to settle for less. And all of it, the low prices, the smiling faces, the clean stores, the community feeling, it created a kind of loyalty that money can't buy. Sam once said, there is only one boss, the customer. And they can fire everybody in the company from the chairman on down simply by spending their money somewhere else. It sounds empowering, doesn't it? Like we had the power, like this massive machine was still working for us. But here's where it starts to get complicated. Because that same philosophy, those low prices, that obsessive customer-first attitude, also became the weapon, the justification for everything that would follow. When you're focused on cutting costs at all costs, where do you start cutting? Promotions, benefits, wages, worker protections. And what happens when the customer is always right becomes an excuse to ignore the people who keep the store running. What started as empowerment quietly morphed into exploitation. But in the beginning, people didn't see that. They just saw the deals, the friendly greeters, the American dream, and Sam. He stayed humble, at least publicly. He didn't live in a mansion. He drove a pickup truck. He wore the same clothes he always had. He gave speeches about integrity and hard work and treating people with respect. And maybe he really believed it. But as the company grew, something else grew with it. Pressure. Pressure to expand faster, open more stores, beat competitors, increase profits, please shareholders, and somewhere along the way, the soul of Walmart, the heart that Sam had built it on, started to fade, quietly, slowly, almost invisibly, until one day the cheer stopped feeling inspiring and started feeling like a lie. Chapter 5. How Walmart Took Over America. I remember the first time I realized Walmart was everywhere. It wasn't one specific moment, it was more like a slow realization. One day I just looked around and noticed no matter where you go in America, there's a Walmart. Big cities, small towns, freeway exits in the middle of nowhere. They're there. Like they've always been there. And the crazy part is, that didn't happen by accident. See, once Sam Walton opened that first Walmart discount city in Rogers, Arkansas back in 1962, things moved fast. Like, faster than anyone expected. Within just a few years, there were multiple Walmarts across the state, and not in big, shiny urban centers either. These were rural towns, forgotten places, places where other retailers didn't even bother to look. But that's where Sam saw opportunity. While competitors ignored low-income communities, Sam understood them. He knew people didn't want charity. They wanted options, and they wanted prices that made sense for their paychecks. So he gave them both, and they responded in droves. Walmart's growth strategy was kind of brilliant in a low-key way. They didn't just drop stores randomly across the country. They spread out slowly like roots from a tree. One store would open, and then another one 30 miles away, then another, and another. Every new store was close enough to benefit from the existing supply chain, but far enough to tap into a new customer base. That methodical expansion. It worked. By the end of the 1980s, Walmart had over 1,000 stores. By the 1990s, they were the largest retailer in America. And here's the thing, most of us didn't even question it. Why would we? Everything we needed was in one place, and it was cheap. Not a little cheap, shockingly cheap. So cheap, in fact, that you could leave with a full cart and still feel like you'd pulled off a financial miracle. A microwave for $40 jeans, for $10 groceries, for a family of four under $100. It felt like magic. But behind that magic was a system. Walmart didn't just sell products. They controlled the way those products were made, priced, and shipped. They pressured suppliers to lower their costs, sometimes beyond reason. And when suppliers couldn't keep up, Walmart would just drop them and move on to the next. No loyalty, no negotiation, just bottom lines. And the stores. They weren't glamorous. No polished marble floors, no fancy lighting, just cement, linoleum, fluorescent bulbs, and shelves packed to the brim. It didn't matter. The store wasn't supposed to feel luxurious. It was supposed to feel accessible. That was the genius of it all. Walmart marketed itself as the people's store. And in a way it was. For people working long hours for low wages, it offered something rare, the ability to afford more with less. But here's where things get uncomfortable. Because the more Walmart grew, the more everything else started to shrink. Small businesses couldn't compete with Walmart's prices. I mean, how could they? They didn't have the buying power. They didn't have the scale. They didn't have a corporate empire behind them. So one by one, they disappeared. Hardware stores, bookshops, clothing boutiques, local grocers, gone. And what filled their place, a parking lot, a massive rectangle of gray, and a single glowing Walmart sign. People called it progress. But sometimes progress feels a lot like erasure. I've read studies, actual data, that show how opening a Walmart in a small town often hurts the local economy more than it helps. Sure, it creates jobs, but many of those jobs are part-time, low-wage and offer little to no upward mobility. Meanwhile, the businesses that had been there for decades, the ones run by neighbors and families, get crushed. And the scariest part, Walmart knew this. They knew what they were doing. They studied it, planned for it, designed their growth to dominate, not just participate, not to share space, but to own it. By the mid-2000s, Walmart was opening 4 new supercenters every week. 4 every week. Where were they finding the space? How were they staffing them? It didn't matter. They just kept going. And while all of this was happening, the company's public image remained strangely clean. They weren't being portrayed as ruthless tycoons or corporate villains. They were still the neighborhood store, the place where your cousin got her first job, where your grandma bought her garden hose, where the parking lot always had a random cart sitting in the middle of nowhere. But make no mistake, this was no mom-and-pop operation. This was empire building. And at the center of it all was a family getting richer by the minute. The Waltons. We'll talk more about them later, but just know this: while Americans were pinching pennies in the aisles of Walmart, the Walton family was quietly becoming the richest family in the world, and no one was stopping them. Because Walmart had woven itself so deeply into our lives that removing it felt impossible. Even now, with everything we know, most of us still shop there. Sometimes out of habit, sometimes out of necessity, and sometimes because there just isn't another option. And that's exactly how they wanted it. Chapter 6. The Walmart Effect. Changing how we live. Work and buy. You know what's weird? Walmart didn't just change the retail industry, it changed us. Like how we shop, how we think about value, how we treat the things we buy, and even how we treat the people who sell them to us. That's what people call the Walmart effect. And I've got to be honest, once you see it, you can't unsee it. Let's start with something simple: ownership. Think about it. Years ago, when someone bought a microwave, they expected it to last for decades. That microwave was going to outlive your houseplants, your marriage, maybe even your dog. You bought it once, and that was it. Done. But now we expect things to break. We're okay with it. Because we didn't spend much to begin with. If the microwave craps out in 4 years, no big deal, just get another one for $40. That shift, that came from Walmart, because they made cheap feel normal, expected, even smart. And to be fair, I get it. When you're living paycheck to paycheck, quality isn't always the priority. You just need it to work now. You don't have $150 for a high-end iron, but you might have $20, so you buy it, even if it falls apart 6 months later, and slowly without realizing it, we started thinking of products and even people as disposable. That's the Walmart effect. But it didn't stop with products. It changed our expectations around pricing too. Like, have you ever walked into a store and seen a $35 t-shirt and thought, who do they think they are? Not because it wasn't a nice shirt, but because Walmart has conditioned us to believe that anything over $15 is a ripoff, even if that $35 shirt was made ethically with better materials by workers who were paid fairly. That mindset where low price is always better, no matter the cost, that didn't just happen. It was taught, trained, reinforced every time we walked through those sliding doors and saw rollback signs blinking at us. And the more we bought into it, the more power Walmart gained. Because now they weren't just selling us stuff, they were shaping the entire supply chain behind the stuff, telling manufacturers how to package products, how much to charge, how quickly to deliver, even how much plastic to use. They dictated everything. There's this wild example I read about deodorant. Apparently, back in the day, deodorants used to come in little cardboard boxes. It was just packaging, nothing fancy. But Walmart decided those boxes were a waste too bulky, too expensive to ship too much cardboard. So they told the manufacturers, get rid of the boxes. And they did. Because when Walmart speaks, suppliers listen. They have to. Walmart's too big to say no to. And that might sound harmless, like, okay, no more deodorant boxes, cool. But that's just one example. Imagine that kind of control over thousands of products, thousands of companies. It's not just influence, it's dominance. And the truth is, we let it happen because we wanted the savings, the convenience, the one-stop shop, even when it started to feel different. Have you ever noticed that when you walk into Walmart now something feels off? The shelves are still stocked, the prices are still low, but the vibe is weird, cold, the workers look tired, the lines are long, no one seems happy to be there, not even the customers. It's like the humanity got sucked out somewhere along the way. And maybe that's because Walmart's original philosophy put the customer first, treat employees like family, build community, has been buried under profit reports and expansion plans. The people who stock the shelves and scan the items, they're not seen as associates anymore. They're labor, overworked, underpaid, replaceable, and yet they're the ones holding the whole place together. It's wild, right? A store that was built on the idea of serving people ends up forgetting the very people who keep it running. But again, that's part of the Walmart effect too. Because once they trained us to expect everything for less, there wasn't much room left to care how it got there, or who paid the price. And you know what's really scary? We got used to it. We got used to lower wages, to understaffed stores, to fewer benefits, to jobs that don't pay enough to live on, all in the name of keeping costs down. But here's the thing, those costs didn't just disappear. They got passed on to the workers, to the small businesses, to the communities that no longer have mom and pop shops, because Walmart moved in and wiped them out. And yeah, the prices might be low. But what did we really save? Chapter 7, Behind the Aisles. The truth about Walmart's workers. There's this phrase Walmart loves to use. We're a family. You hear it in their training videos and corporate statements, even printed on those bright blue associate vests. We're all family here. And for a long time I believed it. A lot of people did. But the thing is, if you stay long enough and listen closely, you start to realize this isn't family. This is a machine powered by millions of workers who are often overworked, underpaid, and completely invisible to the people making the decisions. I remember talking to someone I knew who worked at Walmart for almost a decade. She started as a cashier in her early 20s, said it was supposed to be temporary, just something to help pay the bills. But years passed. She got promoted, became a department manager, took on more responsibilities, and you'd think that with time, experience, and loyalty, things would get better. Right. But the truth was, nothing changed. Her pay barely increased. Her hours were constantly being cut. Her health benefits were minimal. And every time she tried to ask questions, raise concerns, or push back, the message was clear. You're lucky to have a job. Be quiet and do it. That's not what family looks like. And sadly, her story isn't unique. For years, Walmart has faced criticism over how it treats its workers. From inconsistent scheduling to stagnant wages to pushing full-time employees down to part-time status just to avoid giving them benefits. And when people started to speak up, when workers tried to organize to unionize to protect themselves, Walmart didn't just ignore it, they crushed it. In 2000, a group of meat department employees at a Walmart in Texas voted to unionize. Just a small group of butchers who wanted better conditions, safer tools, and more predictable hours. Seems fair, right? Walmart's response. They eliminated every single meat cutting department in every store across the entire country. Let that sink in. They didn't just shut it down in Texas, they shut it down everywhere. Thousands of people lost their jobs overnight just because a few dared to speak up. And that sent a message. A loud, chilling message. If you challenge us, we'll erase you. After that, any mention of unionizing became taboo. Walmart even started showing anti-union training videos to new hires, painting unions as greedy outsiders, trying to interfere in their family culture. They made it seem like organizing for fair wages and safety was somehow a betrayal. But here's what's so frustrating. Walmart has the money. Like, really has the money. They could afford to pay their workers a living wage. They could offer real benefits, stable hours, proper training. They choose not to. Because the system they've built, it only works if the people at the bottom stay quiet. And what makes it even worse is that many of the people working at Walmart depend on the store in more ways than one. Because the wages are so low, thousands of Walmart employees rely on government programs like food stamps or Medicaid just to survive. Think about that. You work a 40-hour week and still need public assistance. Meanwhile, the company you work for is reporting billions in annual profits. The Walton family is earning more in interest than you'll see in a lifetime. But here's where it gets truly dark. Even when people started paying attention, even when media outlets reported on these conditions, nothing really changed. Because Walmart's big enough to wait it out, big enough to ignore criticism, big enough to weather bad press, because at the end of the day, they know something a lot of people don't want to admit. We're still going to shop there. And that's the trap. They've become so embedded into our communities, into our lives, that even people who work for them can't always afford to shop anywhere else. That's not a family. That's a monopoly disguised as a friend. I don't blame the employees. I don't blame the cashiers or the stockers or the greeters. I blame the system they've been forced to survive in. A system that tells them they're lucky to have a job while silently profiting off their silence. And the longer this continues, the harder it is to fix. Because the deeper Walmart's roots go, the harder it becomes to pull them out. But if you ask me, the first step is just paying attention, looking past the smiley face stickers and rollback signs and seeing the people behind the register, the people cleaning the floors, stocking the shelves at 2 a.m., the people who are Walmart. Even if the company itself forgets that, sometimes. Chapter 8. Locked in the overnight shift and a corporate cover-up. There's something about working overnight that already feels a little eerie. The silence, the fluorescent lights, the emptiness. It's like you're existing in a world people forgot. But imagine this, you're stocking shelves at 2 a.m. The store is closed to the public, and when your shift ends, you try to leave and realize the doors are locked. Not metaphorically, not emotionally, physically locked. And you're not alone. You're not allowed to leave. Not for fresh air. Not for a break. Not even in an emergency. Sounds like something out of a horror movie, right? Well, for years, this was a very real reality for Walmart night shift employees. It's something the company never advertised. Something they definitely didn't train people to talk about. But behind closed doors, it was happening. In hundreds of stores, across the country. They called it a lock-in policy. The idea was simple and terrifying. Overnight workers, mostly stockers and custodians, were locked inside the store until management decided it was safe to let them out. Not because they did anything wrong, not because it was a high-security facility, just because Walmart didn't trust them. They said it was to prevent theft. That if you couldn't leave, neither could the merchandise. But let's call it what it was, control. Employees were treated like liabilities, like suspects, not human beings. And what makes it even worse is that this wasn't just some rumor whispered between workers. It was proven, investigated, exposed. In 2004, the New York Times published an investigative report on this exact practice. Months of digging, interviews with employees, internal documents, and what they found was staggering. At least 10% of Walmart stores had been using some form of lock-in. That's over 450 stores. Thousands of workers. Some locked in without access to a phone. Some locked in without a manager even present. Some who literally couldn't escape in case of an emergency. And that's not just unethical, that's illegal. There were reports of people getting hurt on the job needing medical help and being told to wait until a manager arrived to unlock the door. There were fire safety violations. Basic human rights violations. And yet, somehow, it went on for years. The official line from Walmart was, of course, denial. When the New York Times article dropped, Walmart executives scrambled. They claimed that the practice was isolated, that any locking of doors was for safety reasons, and that employees could always use the fire exit if needed. But if you've ever worked a minimum wage retail job, you know exactly how that logic breaks down. Nobody wants to be the person who sets off a fire alarm just because they need to pee outside. Nobody wants to lose their job over breaking protocol. So they stayed inside. They followed the unspoken rules. And that's what's so chilling about this story. It shows just how normal things can start to feel when you're desperate to keep a job. When you've been told over and over again that you're lucky to be there, that speaking up is dangerous, that your safety is secondary to the bottom line. After the story came out, something strange happened. Walmart didn't release a big statement. They didn't apologize. They didn't launch a training program or hold themselves accountable. They just quietly stopped locking the doors. Like nothing had happened. Like they hadn't been caught red-handed doing something deeply wrong. And maybe that's what haunts me most. Not the act itself, but the silence that followed. No restitution. No real consequences. Just a PR pivot, and a company that got a little bit sneakier moving forward. Because here's the truth, Walmart doesn't need to chain doors anymore to control people. The system they've built does that for them. When your wages are just low enough that you rely on the very store you work for, when your benefits are so thin that you can't afford to miss a day, when your hours are inconsistent and you don't know if next week's schedule will even let you pay rent, they don't need locks. You're already trapped. Chapter 9, The Price of Silence. The Betty Dukes Lawsuit. If you've ever felt invisible at work, like no matter how hard you try, you're just never seen, then you already understand a little of what Betty Dukes went through. She was one of those people who believed in showing up, in doing the work, in trying to prove herself not with loud words, but with quiet consistency. And for a while, she thought that would be enough. Betty Dukes started working at Walmart in 1994. She was from Pittsburgh, California, not the big Pittsburgh with an H, but the small one in the Bay Area where working-class people did what they could to stay afloat. Betty was a black woman in her 40s, a churchgoer, a community leader. And she believed in what Walmart promised opportunity. They told her, work hard and you'll move up. And she did work hard. She showed up every day. She helped customers. She followed the rules. She didn't cause trouble. But what she started to notice was that no matter how much effort she put in, promotions never seemed to come her way. Raises were inconsistent. Her white male coworkers. They moved up. They got tapped for better positions, better hours, better pay. And when she asked why, she got vague answers, shrugs, sometimes silence. At first she thought maybe it was just her. Maybe she hadn't done enough. Maybe if she pushed a little harder, worked a little longer, kept her head down a little lower, things would change. But they didn't. So Betty started paying attention, watching, listening, talking to other women, especially women of color, working at Walmart stores across the region. And what she found was heartbreaking, but not surprising. She wasn't alone. There were hundreds of women with the same story, passed over, ignored, paid less than men doing the same job, denied promotions, stuck in lower-paying departments like clothing or the cash register, while men were promoted into electronics, sporting goods, and management. And the worst part, Walmart had no real system for promotions, no clear guidelines, no formal job postings. Everything happened behind closed doors. Promotions were based on potential, and you can probably guess who they saw as having that potential and who they didn't. So in 2001, Betty made a decision that would change her life forever. She filed a lawsuit against Walmart, not just for herself, but on behalf of every woman who had ever been treated the same way. It became known as Dukes versus Walmart, and it wasn't just a lawsuit. It was a statement, a demand to be seen. The case argued that Walmart's practices weren't just unfair, they were systemic, that the company's entire structure was designed in a way that allowed gender discrimination to flourish, while giving executives plausible deniability. And the evidence, it was overwhelming. Statistical analyses showed that women made up 70% of Walmart's hourly workforce, but only about 30% of its managers. Women were paid less than men in nearly every region, even when doing the same jobs. And there were countless first-hand accounts from women who had been told things like, "Men are just more reliable. You should focus on your family. You're not management material." Betty stood in front of cameras, gave interviews, testified, not because she wanted fame, but because she wanted justice. She believed that if enough people saw what was happening behind the scenes, things would have to change. But Walmart, they fought back. Hard. They argued that the case was too big, that the company couldn't be held responsible for the decisions of individual store managers, that the women's stories were too different to be part of a single class action suit. And in 2011, after a decade of legal battles, the Supreme Court sided with Walmart. They threw the case out, not because the discrimination didn't happen, but because according to the court, the group of women was too broad, too diverse. There was no common thread, which, when you think about it, is exactly what made it real. Because discrimination doesn't always wear a name tag. It doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it's 1,000 tiny decisions made quietly, repeated daily, across different states, different stores, different women, until it becomes the air you breathe. And the system counts on that silence. It feeds off of it. But Betty Dukes, she refused to stay silent. Even after the lawsuit was dismissed, she kept speaking out, kept pushing for reform. She became a symbol flawed human brave of what it means to stand up when everyone tells you to sit down. And yeah, she didn't win in court. But she wasn't wrong. Her story sparked a national conversation. It opened the door for future lawsuits, future whistleblowers, future women who refused to be erased. And for me, that matters. Because sometimes justice isn't about the ruling. It's about the reckoning. Chapter 10. The Cost of Convenience. How we became dependent on a giant. You know, I used to think convenience was harmless. Like, what's the big deal if I can grab laundry detergent, a flat-screen TV, a bag of oranges, and a pair of socks all in one place? If anything, it felt like a miracle. Efficient, easy, smart. But the more I learned, the more I started to ask convenient for who and at what cost. Because somewhere along the way, our desire for easy and cheap became something else. It became dependence. We didn't just shop at Walmart, we relied on it. For our groceries, for our school supplies, for our medicine, even for our jobs. Especially in small towns where Walmart didn't just become a store, it became the store, the only place to go. And that's where things start to get uncomfortable. Because once a company becomes that essential to your daily life, it stops being just a store. It starts to act more like infrastructure. And infrastructure isn't something you can just swap out overnight. I've talked to people who hate working at Walmart, who feel undervalued, overworked, and trapped, but they stay because it's the only gig in town. Because the local hardware store closed, the grocery chain left years ago, the pharmacy got absorbed. Now it's all under one roof, one logo, one set of rules. And even if you want to leave, where would you go? That's not capitalism, that's a chokehold. I've heard stories of rural towns where Walmart is not just the biggest employer, it's the only one. Where high school kids, retirees, and parents all compete for the same part-time hours. Where people work for wages that barely cover gas to get to the next shift. Where workers end up spending a portion of their paycheck at the same store that paid them because it's the only place left to shop. It's like Walmart became the house, the dealer, and the game all at once. And the irony is, we asked for it. Not intentionally, of course. But little by little, we traded variety for low prices. We stopped going to 5 different stores when we could just go to one. We stopped supporting local when local couldn't compete. And we convinced ourselves that a few saved dollars were worth it, even when those savings came at someone else's expense. And here's the wildest part. Even when Walmart leaves a town, which they sometimes do, if profits drop or demographics shift, it's not like everything magically goes back to how it was. Because by then, the damage is already done. The local economy hollowed out, the small businesses long gone, the community dependent, and the building usually abandoned. A giant empty shell, a reminder of what once was, and what never quite worked the way it promised. That's the real cost of convenience. Not just money, but agency, independence, choice. We didn't just invite Walmart into our lives, we gave them the keys to the whole damn house. And the scariest part? Most of us still see it as normal. We joke about the late-night Walmart runs. We post memes about the chaos in the aisles. We roll our eyes at the long lines and empty shelves, but we still go. Because it's there. Because it's easy. Because we don't know where else to go. But deep down, I think a lot of us are starting to feel it, that quiet discomfort. That sense that maybe we gave up more than we realized. That maybe cheap wasn't worth it. Because when one company controls where we shop, what we buy, how much we earn, and even where we work, that's not convenience anymore. That's control. Chapter 11. The Walton Family. Quiet billionaires in a loud world. You don't hear much from the Waltons. They're not like other billionaires. They're not throwing wild parties on super yachts, or getting into Twitter wars, or buying social media platforms just because they can. They stay quiet, reserved, almost invisible. And maybe that's what makes it all feel even stranger. Because the Walton family descendants of Sam Walton, the founder of Walmart, aren't just rich. They're historically rich. Collectively, they're worth well over $200 billion. That's billion with a B. To put that into perspective, the Walton family owns more wealth than about 40% of Americans combined. Think about that. 5 or 6 people, more than 130 million others, and yet most people couldn't pick them out of a lineup. Alice Walton, the art lover, Jim Walton, the banker, Rob Walton, who served as chairman of Walmart for over 2 decades. They live in luxury, but rarely in the spotlight. They don't need to be loud, because their power speaks for them. Every time someone scans a barcode at a Walmart checkout, the Walton fortune grows. Every gallon of milk, every discount TV, every pack of socks, each one drops a few more cents into a mountain of wealth most of us can't even begin to imagine. And that would be one thing if the wealth was being reinvested in the people who earned it. But it's not. Walmart employees, millions of them, are still fighting for better wages, more predictable schedules, basic benefits. And yet the Walton family could literally end those problems overnight. They could raise wages to $20 an hour across the board and still be billionaires for generations. But they don't. They choose not to. And that choice, that silence, is what sticks with me. Because we've created this mythology around the rich, that they must be smarter, more disciplined, more deserving, that if they have more, it's because they worked harder. But let's be real, the Walton heirs were born into this wealth. They didn't build Walmart. Sam did. They inherited it, like royalty. And while workers are told to tighten their belts, skip vacations, pick up extra shifts just to get by, the Waltons are quietly amassing more wealth every single minute of every single day. I've seen the numbers. In 2020, during the height of the pandemic, when essential workers were risking their lives just to keep shelves stocked, the Walton family made an additional $25 billion in wealth. Just from stock gains, just from staying home. That's not trickle-down economics. That's a waterfall going one way. And the strangest thing is, they don't even pretend to be involved. The family rarely comments on Walmart's labor practices. They don't show up at stores. They don't speak publicly about the workers whose sweat and stress keep their empire alive. They donate to museums, fund charter schools, commission sculptures. Quiet philanthropy wrapped in taste and elegance. But you won't find them pushing for a living wage at Walmart. You won't see them fighting for health care for part-time employees. You won't hear them addressing the class action lawsuits, the gender discrimination, the union busting, or the food stamps their own workers depend on. And maybe that's by design, because if they had to really see it, they might have to answer for it. But silence. Silence is easier. And you know what? In a world where noise is everywhere, silence can be powerful. It can be strategic. It can protect you. But it also says a lot. Because when you've got the power to change things, and you don't, that's not just passive. That's a choice. And it's not just about money. It's about values. It's about what kind of world you're willing to live in, even when you know you're one of the few people who can actually shape it. The Walton family could be remembered for so much more than their fortune. But for now, they'll be remembered for what they didn't say, for what they didn't do, for what they allowed to continue because it kept the machine running. And maybe that's the most haunting part of all. Chapter 12. What We Can't Unsee. Looking at ourselves in the Walmart mirror. I guess the hardest part about all of this is realizing that the story of Walmart isn't just about them, it's about us too, because somewhere along the line, we all played a part, some knowingly, some without a second thought. We swiped our cards, loaded up our carts, and told ourselves it was fine, that we were just saving money, that we were doing what we had to do, and honestly, I get it. I've done it too. I've stood in those long checkout lines. I've grabbed a $5 hoodie off the rack. I've walked into Walmart thinking I'd buy toothpaste and walked out with a full cart, somehow spending less than $50. It felt like winning. But now knowing what I know, it doesn't feel the same. It feels complicated, because behind every low price was a cost I couldn't see at the time. A woman whose promotion was quietly denied. A teenager working the overnight shift with the doors locked behind him. A single mom checking groceries for minimum wage, then buying dinner from the same store because it's all she could afford. And it's easy to look away. It's always been easy to look away. Walmart made sure of that. They built a brand on invisibility, on making the ugly parts disappear behind rollbacks and smiley faces and endless aisles of stuff. But once you've seen it, once you've really seen it, you can't unsee it. And that's the mirror we're left holding. A big, unflinching one. Because as much as we want to blame the billionaires and the executives and the policies, they didn't build this empire alone. They built it with our help, with our loyalty, with our silence. And yeah, maybe we were manipulated. Maybe we didn't have better options. Maybe we did what we had to do to get by in a system that was never built with us in mind. But now we know. And that knowledge, it's heavy. It's easy to feel powerless, like nothing we do will matter, like the machine is too big, too far gone. But I don't believe that, because awareness is power, and stories like this, uncomfortable, messy, painful, they force us to slow down, to think, to question what we support, what we ignore, what we tolerate. Maybe the real crime isn't just corporate greed. Maybe it's how numb we've become to it. How we've learned to accept exploitation so long as it's dressed in everyday clothes. So long as it doesn't knock too loudly on our front door, but now we hear it. Now we see it. And maybe, just maybe, that changes things. We don't have to tear the system down overnight, but we can start asking better questions. We can support better practices. We can stop pretending that cheap always means good. Because the truth is, nothing is truly cheap if it costs someone else their dignity. Walmart didn't become what it is by accident, and we won't fix it by accident either. It'll take intention, and honesty, and uncomfortable conversations like this one. But maybe that's the first step. Not outrage, not blame, just recognition. Looking in the mirror and saying, I see it now, and I want to do better. If you've made it this far, thank you for staying with me. This story isn't easy. It's uncomfortable. It challenges the way we live our lives every day, but that's what truth does. It doesn't whisper, it lingers, and it asks us to do something with it. I'm not here to tell you what to think, but I am here to ask now that you know, what will you do? Maybe it's where you shop. Maybe it's how you speak up. Or maybe it's just paying closer attention to the people who keep everything running quietly in the background. Because the moment we stop looking away, the moment we care, that's when real change begins. If you found this story meaningful, I hope you'll share it. Comment, reflect, pass it on. These aren't just corporate headlines, these are real lives, real voices, real consequences. This has been True Crime Echoes, and the echo, that's up to you.